I want to make a quick response to a comment from my last video. Somebody said they were disappointed that I was going all negative on the church, and I think that is maybe the thought when people see somebody that is doing something that isn't fully in line with what the church is doing, and they think that you are throwing things away and leaving it all behind, that you've lost faith, that you've gone off the path and you're just going to go and drink your coffee and sin and do whatever. And so I want to make some clarifications about that for those who with good intent are leaving these messages feeling like that is my purpose. So a few years ago, as I was reading the scriptures, I started noticing things like in John 14, where Jesus says that for those who believe, they would do greater works than he did because he goes to the Father. And then we see in Moroni chapter 7, Mormon says that if angels have stopped appearing to men and miracles aren't happening, then there is no faith. And he says, woe unto you if there's no faith, because awful is your situation. And so I started looking at evidences of my belief and my faith, and also those around me, and even the leaders of the church in my area and all the way up, and started noticing that we are not experiencing the gifts of the Spirit and the evidences that Jesus talked about, even to the degree that were in the very early time of the church. So if those aren't experienced in our day and haven't been for 170, 180 years, I believe the prophets, Jesus, Mormon, Moroni, Nephi, I believe they're telling us that we need to be worried. We should be worried, and we should look for evidences of our belief. Signs follow them that believe. Now, we're not saying to go look after signs. We're not saying to seek after miracles, but you should be able to look back in hindsight and see miracles happening and see a difference in the way that your life has changed over time. Especially, you should be able to see a path to growth. So as I began to look at that, one of the prayers that I prayed was for God to open my eyes. And as he did, he started to show me where I lack and what I need to do better. And he also began to show me places where the church is lacking or is not doing what I would do to the best of my integrity if I was in charge. There's interesting things like being on the High Council, and previously when I was the state clerk, every time we would go into a state council or High Council meeting, everyone in the room would stand up when the stake president would enter the room. And they would not sit down until the stake president was seated at the table. And that made me super uncomfortable. And I thought to myself, there is no way in the world that I would ever let people do that. I don't care if they do it out of respect. I would tell them not to. Because I don't feel like it's appropriate. I feel like, personally, for me, that is... that would be putting myself up as somebody that I should not be, and having me respected at a level that I should not be. Even Jesus, when I think it was the rich young man came to him and said, "Good master," Jesus said, "Why are you calling me good? There's nobody good but the Father." Even Jesus realized, or was teaching, that we should not be putting men up on a pedestal that they don't deserve. Certainly Jesus deserved it, but he came to humble himself below all people. So anyway, I find these weird little things where the church does things and leaders of the church do things that I could not with integrity do myself. And I will allow for that, for standing up for the high council, state council, whatever. It's very uncomfortable for me. I don't think it's right. But for myself and my own spirituality, there are things that the Lord had to show me. I had to see reality in order to be able to improve. How can you not? So if you see that your tithing is going to UNICEF and the UN, and all your humanitarian donations are going there, and the poor and the needy, although we're commanded to help them, and that was a huge deal for Jesus in his lifetime. That's a huge part of what all of the Old Testament and the New Testament and the Book of Mormon talk about. And then when we see the reality of things is that we are not doing that today as a church, and as we take 10% of our tithing and give it to the church, and that goes towards temples and buildings, and then it goes into the Ensign Peak Fund, and it gets invested in 13 different shell companies. It gets invested in malls and Salt Lake and stuff like that. As you begin to see what the reality of things is, then you say, what if my 10% was going and actually helping somebody? Or actually my 10%, if it was going to Zimbabwe or somebody somewhere in Africa or Southeast Asia, I could take that 10% and I could probably help 100 people with that 10% every single month, and make a huge difference. Now think if all of my neighbors were doing the same thing, and now think if all of my stake or the Utah area or the whole church was doing that, how that could make a massive difference. And yet it's not. I do concede that the church, of course, needs money to maintain their buildings and church houses and things like that. That's a necessary part of things, but that should not be the focus of our offerings. Jesus said, inasmuch as you've done it to one of the least of these, you've done it to me, or inasmuch as you have not done it to one of the least of these, you have not done it to me. And that was the parable of the sheep and the goats. That's when Jesus divides people at the last day, and people are going to say, Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name? Didn't we do all these great works? And he's going to say, I don't know you. And that is the parable. And it's based on the offerings that we give up. So in order for us to give a pure and holy and righteous offering, we have to be able to see the truth as it is. I want to make it clear that, again, this sounds like going negative, but actually it is a path of increased light, big time. In the last 2 years, my understanding of the gospel has changed dramatically. It's grown. It's not been one of, okay, I'm abandoning this church and this prophet and going on to a different group of people with a different prophet. It's not that at all. It shouldn't be that at all. It should be one of taking the Holy Spirit as our guide and finding out what Jesus would do if he were in our place and doing that. It should be more of one of dedication to God. It should be one of consecrating your time and your efforts and connecting to the Spirit every day more and more and more, and getting further instruction from God. The problem we have is that we have the mentality prophesied by Nephi of all is well in Zion, and all is well in Zion really just means I'm done. I'm saved, I'm done, I'm good, I'm in the right box, and therefore I don't really need to change anything. I give 10% of my money every month to the church. I go to church, I go to the temple, and so I'm done. And in reality, my experience as I've done that is I have gotten a little bit of extra light doing that, but it's mostly one of a plateau. It's mostly one of stagnation. It's mostly one of non-growth. And connecting to God and asking Him, how can I be more like Christ? What do I need to change next? I realize my awful situation. I realize that I am really so far away from having my emotions and my mind and my body in a place where I can do good continually. Please help me on the next step. And so in that same chapter, 2 Nephi chapter 28, it talks about all is well in Zion. He says that He will reveal to us line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little and there a little. This is as we begin to actually follow Him. And that is a continual upward path of growth and light. There's going to be some pain. There's going to be some things that we learn that are not going to be rainbows, that are going to be difficult. It's going to require us to change a lot of the things that we do, a lot of the ways that we think. It requires us to walk a path that Jesus walked, which was very much independent of the church in His day. And of course it should be. Your path is not the church. Your path is God. Your path is Jesus. And your path has to be different than anybody else's, because you are different than anybody else's. And what you have to learn is different than what anybody else has to learn. So you cannot be a cookie cutter person and get to heaven. It's meant to be a custom university course taught by God to you individually, a little bit at a time. And you can certainly stop at any point along the way. But the point is, you do stop when you stop, and you will stagnate. And when you lose the Spirit, you have lost the path. You've gone off the path. So, for me, take it from me, there is much, much more light available. Much. And there's much more peace and much more joy in that. And a path that seemed daunting, seemed like it was too hard, has become one that I can see through experience that even though there is some pain on this upward journey, that it brings increased light, increased joy, increased knowledge, and increased faith. Not abandoning the faith at all. If you'd like to hear a little bit more of that path as I've been learning it, it is in my Good Doctrine channel that I have linked to here on this same channel. So just go look and you'll see a link to my Good Doctrine channel. And try to get at least episode 12. And if you get there, you'll see what I'm talking about. But then there's a lot more beyond that, because I've taught every step as I have been given that a little bit by a little bit along the way. So this is about greater things. This is about living the gospel more and more. And for me, the church has been a huge part of my journey. That's where I've learned the Book of Mormon. It's where I serve my mission. It's where I learned to love being in the scriptures and feeling the Spirit and knowing God. And it has been for me part of the path, but it is not the destination.